أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم. تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوم ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كما أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميعا لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها هبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون. وخلقنا له من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا نطعم من لو شاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميعا لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أحد إليكم يا بني آدم لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد ضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه شعرا وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به، وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولد الحسن قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أماه، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولد الحسين عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أماه، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي وشافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وصي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه. يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال: وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومأ بيدي اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم، هو عدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم. فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذنب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبريل: يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبريل: يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبريل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام، ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم. فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله: وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله، إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبريل معنا تحت الكساء، فقال لأبي: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله: يا علي، والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله هما، ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غما، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
मुबारक 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 हो ये शादी, मुबारक हो ये शादी, मुबारक हो ये शादी, मुबारक हो ये शादी, मुबारक।
जहाँ शादी की महफिल वो कसीदे हम सुनाते हैं,
जहाँ शादी की महफिल हो कसीदे हम सुनाते हैं, जहाँ शादी की महफिल हो कसीदे हम सुनाते हैं,
जहाँ शादी की महफिल हो, जहाँ शादी की महफिल हो कसीदे हम सुनाते हैं।
मुबारक हो ये शादी, मुबारक हो ये शादी, अली के चाहने वाले खुशी ऐसे मनाते हैं, जहाँ शादी की महफिल हो कसीदे हम सुनाते हैं।
विला वाले यहाँ पर हैं, वली का जिक्र लाजिम है, खुदा वाले यहाँ पर हैं, नबी का जिक्र लाजिम है, अली वाले की शादी है, अली का जिक्र लाजिम है। कोई मिलाद करते हैं, कोई मिलाद करते हैं, कोई महफिल सजाते हैं।
मुबारक हो ये शादी, मुबारक हो ये शादी, अली के खुशी ऐसे मनाते हैं जहाँ शादी की महफिल हो कसीदे हम सुनाते हैं
जहाँ हो जिक्र जहरा आसमां ऐसी जमी होगी वहाँ माहौल में पाकीज़गी भी बिल यकी होगी अली की मनकबत होगी तो मौसीकी नहीं होगी गुनाहों से हर की तकरीर गुनाहों से हर की तकरीर दामन बचाते हैं
मुबारक हो ये शादी मुबारक हो ये शादी
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين آمنوا واتبعتهم ذريتهم بإيمان ألحقنا بهم ذريتهم وألتناهم من عملهم من شيء كل امرئ بما كسب رهين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My congratulations to you all, as today we celebrate the Wiladat of our mistress and master, Sayyidat Zainab salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In talking about this personality, we begin our discussion by looking at this verse of Surah At-Tur, the 21st verse of the 52nd surah, in which Allah is making the statement. He says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَاتَّبَعَتْهُمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ بِإِيمَانٍ أَلْحَقْنَا بِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَمَا أَلَتْنَاهُمْ مِنْ عَمَلِهِمْ مِنْ شَيْءٍ كُلُّ امْرِئٍ بِمَا كَسَبَ رَهِينٌ. But Allah is making the statement, and as for those who believe, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَاتَّبَعَتْهُمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ, and their offspring follow them in faith, we will unite them with their offspring, and we will not diminish any of their works for them or any of the rewards that they will earn. And then Allah finishes this ayah by saying, and every man or every person is responsible for what he or she or what they will earn. This verse talks about how Allah has promised the bounty and the blessing that we will be, if our families are on faith with us, that they will be joined with us in heaven, and it will be one of the sources of mercy of Allah and blessings of Allah that we shall have our family with us in heaven. The fundamental of having them with us in heaven, though, relies on the condition where Allah explains that their offspring follow them in faith. Having our offspring follow us in faith, and the importance of this investment, to make the investment in raising our children on the path of faith, is one of the key critical components that we have to accomplish in this life. And part of that is the upbringing of our children so that they follow us in faith and they understand the significance of faith. The study of upbringing children and how do we raise good children and how do we ensure that they follow the correct path that we want them to is something that is not only a focal point of discussion within Islam, but even in the larger picture of society. It's always a question and curiosity of the impact of parents' environment that how are children to turn out well? What is the most important factors we need to pay attention to? As such, in contemporary debate, we see the topic of nature versus nurture. This debate or this discourse that happens both philosophically and scientifically takes place on the principle that what is the most important factor for success in the life of a human being? Is it their nature, meaning the genetics that are passed down from the parents and from the grandparents and from the family tree that have the greatest impact on a child, that show that whether this child will be successful in life? Or is it more important that rather forget the genetics that a child inherits, that the most important thing is the nurture and the environment and the resources and the healthcare that is afforded to a child after their birth that gives us the indication that this child will be successful in life? The debate between these 2 points of significance, is it nature and genetics that will indicate success? One of the debated points in this shows that, for example, certain athletes have the genetic disposition that they should be successful in their field. They have the genetic disposition that shows that they will become great in the efforts that they want to achieve. And that these genetics need to be focused upon as a part of the upbringing of a successful individual. The counterpoint to this is obviously in nurture, to say that whatever genetic material a person has received is only enhanced and its true potential is only released if the environment, the nurture, the care of the parents directs the person to achieving their goals. A variety of different experiments have been done on the topic that kind of look at, for example, taking identical twins and splitting them up and then doing studies upon them and showing different processes of the impact of one versus the other. And maybe at the end of the day, we can say the conclusion is inconclusive in the fact that if we change the variables enough, we can find support for either argument. Our concern when raising an upright child is to look at how does Islam view both arguments of nature and nurture, and where is our priority put and how do we implement it in our lives? When we look at the teachings of Islam, we see that Islam gives importance to both sides of the discussion. Both nature and genetics are important, as well as nurture is important. One of the places that we see this importance of these two different criterion is when we take a look at, for example, the ziyarat of the Ma'sumin alayhimus salam. We see the importance of the stress on the nature and the genetic side when we see in our ziyarat the statements that come, Ashhadu annaka kunta nuran fil aslab al-shamikha wal arham al-mutahhara lam tunajjiska al-jahiliyatu bi anjasiha wa lam tulbiska min mudlahimmati thiyabiha. These statements show us that one of the specialities of the imams and the specialities of these personalities was that we can swear that they were Ashhadu annaka kunta nuran, that they were a light in the pure loins and the wombs of their mothers, and they were never affected by jahiliyyah, by ignorance, and they were never covered in ignorance. That Allah created and that these personalities were those who came from a lineage of preservation, of perseverance and protection that came to them through the protection of their parents and the generations that came before them. This is a lesson to us of the importance that we have, that when we want to raise good, upright children, one of the factors that we should pay attention to is the genetics that we pass to our child. Now, that doesn't mean that, for example, that we're looking at necessarily the diseases that pass before and that how they impact the child. That's one factor. But the greater, more significant factor is how Allah is designating the importance of the genetics that are being passed to the offspring that are a'imma. Lam tunajjiska al-jahiliyatu bi anjasiha. That ignorance did not touch you, ignorance did not impact you. Our responsibility as parents, when we look at the genetics and raising upright children that will be joined with us in heaven, is that from the genetic aspect, we prepare the aspect of purifying ourselves and removing ourselves from najasat, from jahalat, from impurities, so as to give purity to the source from which our children are born. The significance of this aspect is discussed by many ulama that talk about the idea, the concept, that they present a philosophy that says that the genetics that you pass, the purification you pass to your child, the preparation for becoming a good parent begins from the age you become baligh. From the age of bulugh, your actions, your behaviors start to impact your offspring and creating purity for them through this process. And that as we purify ourselves, we purify our next generation. If we want our children to be mujtahideen, ulama, pious individuals, righteous individuals, it's not simply about what we do with them after they're born. It's about how we prepare for them before they are born. What is our character? What is our behavior? How do we go about living our lives will impact our children. This aspect of the nature side of the conversation becomes even important when we take a look and we see that in certain riwayat, the imams explain that even at the time of conception, certain behaviors and characteristics will impact the offspring that you have. Will put either love in the hearts of your children that will be born to you, or can cause, for example, even animosity in the hearts of your children towards the Ahlul Bayt by the condition that they are born in. We have just as much of a responsibility to that child who is born to us to make them upright, to make them righteous after their birth. We have the same level of responsibility before their birth. Do we consume halal? Are we careful of our conditions? Are we careful of our behaviors and how we interact with society? All of these will play a role in the next generation that comes. If we want our children to be those who are with us in heaven, that follow us on the faith that Allah is talking about, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَاتَّبَعَتْهُمْ ذُرِّيَّتُهُمْ, that those who are believers and their children and their offspring follow them, the conversation begins from nature. We start the process of preparing them. This is why Allah describes amongst the sifat of Ahlul Bayt and the sifat of the Ma'sumin is the purity that was passed down to them by every generation. That every generation played a hand in the purification and improvement in the quality of the personality and the lifestyle that they lived, so that the next generation would be pure, so that the next generation would maintain and attain its proximity from the moment of birth and have these benefits. Now, the same way we're seeing the impact of nature in this conversation and looking at the way nature is highlighted in these ziyarat of the Ahlul Bayt. Ashhadu annaka kunta nuran fil aslam bishamikha wal arham al mutahhara. Allah puts the same level of influence on nurture as well too. And that the environment that we give our children, the character we teach our children, the time we spend with them is also significant as well too. When we see in ziyarat, أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وأعطيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله واتبعت الله حق لعنة الله على الشيطان. The word escapes me, but it talks about that these are those who performed prayers, gave zakat, did good, forbade evil, followed the example of أطعت الله ورسوله, that they followed the example that are the commands of Allah and His Prophet. All of these are actions that were nurtured within them, that they were taught and were given the time to learn these behaviors and to establish these characteristics. This shows the impact that an imam, when we talk about the greatness, or when we talk about the greatness of these ma'sumin, that it comes from both sides. That one side of it is the nature that was established in them, the purification that came to them, and the efforts of their generations before them. The same way when we want our children to be upright, we look at how our life is lived before that child enters this world, so that to give them a source of purity by which they enter into this life. The other side of the coin of nurture is teaching them and spending that time to educate them on these actions and creating an environment that creates love of these actions and following the ahkam of Islam in their household. When we combine these two, then we raise our children on the path of faith, and we raise our children to be good followers of the religion of Allah. That's when we start talking about where Allah is describing that those who have faith and their children follow them in faith, that they shall be joined in heaven together, and they shall be kept in good company, and it shall be a reward and cooling for their eyes. This happens through both of these sides. We have to put effort into both of these conditions. The ideal conclusion of both of this effort, when we want to see the ultimate example of this, we see a personality like Sayyida Zainab, salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This Bibi Zainab is someone who was born in the 5th year after Hijrah. And even in her naming, she has a unique and special characteristic that is affiliated with the Masumin. That it's said that when Sayyida Zainab was born, that Bibi Fatima handed her to Imam Ali and said, "Name your daughter." Imam Ali replied, "How can I name her when Rasulullah is to name her first?" It's said that Rasulullah happened to be on a journey at this time, and they waited for Rasulullah to return. And as was the habit of Rasulullah, whenever he would come back from a journey, the first place he would go would be to see Bibi Fatima. And when he went to see her, he found that Bibi Zainab had been born, and they asked, "Ya Rasulullah, name her." And Rasulullah replies, he says, "How shall I name her when Allah is the one who will name her and has the greatest?" We wait for his answer in naming this child. And it said that Jibreel came down at this time and said that name her Zainab. Coming from the two sources, one is Zaina, is beautification or ornamentation, and the second from Abi, of the father, beautification or adornment of her father. Even the name of Sayyida Zainab as the ornament or the adornment of her father shows and gives us a lesson of the impact and the responsibility of a father in the upbringing of his daughters. Now look at the beauty of it, that how is it that the daughter shall be the adornment of her father if the father is not the one who will implement and nurture those characteristics within her? This in itself is a lesson for the impact of the responsibility that fathers have to their daughters. If the daughter is to be the adornment of the father, then the father must be the one who prepares that daughter and is involved in her upbringing. It's such a beautiful explanation of the role that the father plays in the life and the upbringing of his daughter. Sayyida Zainab, in terms of her upbringing, from the age of 5, when she loses her mother, Amir al-Mu'mineen is the one who takes over the primary responsibility of her upbringing at that point in time. She's in the hands of her father. The impact of this in her life we saw even, for example, when she was present in the most difficult of circumstances, that they said, certainly we have heard the words of Ali ibn Abi Talib again. That Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, not knowing who this lady was in his court, when he asked the question, "Who is this that speaks to me in such a way?" And they told him that this is Zainab bint Ali. He says, certainly she speaks like her father. This is the impact and the effort of the nurture that was placed into Sayyida Zainab. That Sayyida Zainab, from her name, is a demonstration of the role of nurture in the upbringing of a child. In terms of her nature, we know that she shares the same wombs as Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, that she comes from the same lineage as Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, which is a demonstration to us of the greatness of what she has inherited in terms of her characteristics that came to her through her genetics and through her history. And her nurture is shown through the behavior and presentation that is given to us through the example she presents and the name that she possesses of the ornamentation of her father, or the one who spoke like Ali ibn Abi Talib. The fadail of Sayyida Zainab are few, because one of the aspects of the greatness of her fadail is her hijab, and the freedom of the women of the household of the Holy Prophet, that they were not presented amongst society, but rather that their preservation of hijab was one of the priorities that they were given. But we know a few of these characteristics. One, for example, is the famous narration that at her birth, when Rasulullah takes Sayyidah Zainab into his hands, he says, I advise my community and my ummah, those that are present and those that are absent, to respect and honor this child, because certainly she is the second Khadija. Rasulullah gives Sayyidah Zainab the title of being the second Khadija. Sayyidah Khadija is the mother of Sayyidah Fatima and is of a great caliber and is the wife of Rasulullah. There are many analyses that are given about the impact of Rasulullah labeling Sayyidah Zainab as the second Khadija. One of which delves into the aspect of the fact that Sayyidah Khadija is one who spent her life with great wealth and great status and position, and that where we look at the end of her life is where sacrifices, difficulties, trials, and tribulations fell her in support of Rasulullah. And at that point in time, that all of this was lost, and she went through great difficulties and sacrificed everything that she had in the way of Islam. Similarly, the life of Sayyidah Zainab, we see, is one that is spent with great comfort and plenty. How? From her father's house, the house of Imam Ali, Sayyidah Zainab is married to Abdullah ibn Ja'far. Abdullah ibn Ja'far is the son of Ja'far al-Tayyar. It's narrated that when Rasulullah went to visit the house of Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar to pay his condolences on the shahadat of Hazrat Ja'far, that he saw this Abdullah was sitting and playing with his toys. And Rasulullah loved children. So before, or at the time of giving this news to his mother and giving the news in the house of the shahadat of Hazrat Ja'far, he asked this child, he says, what are you doing? And Hazrat Abdullah, as a child, replied, he says, I am making a shop and selling things in my shop. And he was playing with little toys and playing on the ground as a child. And it said that Rasulullah at this time placed his hand on the head of Hazrat Abdullah and made dua for him. Oh Allah, make any business and affair that this child performs successful for him. May he be successful in every endeavor that he takes. It said that the barakat of this dua was that Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far became successful in every affair and he was very wealthy. But this wasn't the characteristic on the basis of which Sayyidah Zainab was married to him. Rather, the characteristic that made him the partner for Sayyidah Zainab was that he was known as Bahr al-Jud, that he was known as the sea of benevolence, the sea of giving. That though Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far made great amounts of wealth, he was also known for his extremely open hand in giving generously and helping all of those that were in need, as well as being someone who was knowledgeable about the religion of Islam and someone who was raised under the tutelage of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far possessed this great quality, and we see that Sayyidah Zainab being married to him was a life of affluence that she had with him and a life of giving. Another aspect that we see in the personality of Sayyidah Zainab, which is very important to the upbringing that we take the responsibility of, is that Sayyidah Zainab's continuous attachment to the process of learning and teaching, or teaching in more specific. It's famously narrated that Sayyidah Zainab was a teacher in the city of Medina and was the focal point of answering the questions and offering support to the women of Medina, and that this was only exemplified further when she went to Kufa with her father. Now remember something. At the time of Sayyidah Zainab going to Kufa with her father in the year 37 AH, the age of Sayyidah Zainab is 32 years of age. At 32 years of age, in which time most people are busy in their lives, raising their children, taking care of their households, the most famous characteristic of Sayyidah Zainab that became known to us was that she became the teacher in the city of Kufa for all of the women. When we look at our life goals and what we want to be as a person and as an individual, many times our goals are associated with our unique personality or our unique desires of, for example, owning this, having this many children, having this type of career. And the relationship with Islam becomes more individualistic. Our success as a person is seen that, oh, I'm someone who prays on time and recites Quran and the characteristics that I myself have for myself. The seerah of Sayyidah Zainab is that the success of Sayyidah Zainab and the greatness of her personality is not just in what she did for herself, but that she was the teacher and her involvement in the religion of Islam and the working for the religion of Islam. This is an effect of the nurture that is put into us. We have to demonstrate to our children the importance of Islam in our day-to-day lives, and that Islam is a focal point that we have to achieve, and that Islam is something that deserves dedication of our efforts. Her father was Amir al-Mu'mineen, who was the one who made the call, Saluni, Saluni, qabla an tafqaduni. Ask me before that you are bereft of me. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein were famously the teachers who were present, who taught the religion of Allah and taught the seerah of Rasulullah, so much so that so was Sayyidah Zainab for the women, the one that laid the example and laid the foundations of the religion of Islam. If we want to follow the seerah of Sayyidah Zainab, we have to ensure that Islam is not something that is just measured by what we do for ourselves, but what is the commitment that we make for the sake of Islam. What is the effort that we conduct ourselves with for the sake of Islam? What do we give in the way of Islam? The azamat of Sayyidah Zainab is not only after the event of Karbala, but it's the foundation and the teaching and the status and the position that she conveyed in her time even before the event of Karbala. Another of the qualities that we know of Sayyidah Zainab is the status and the statement that her husband Abdullah ibn Ja'far makes about her. That Abdullah ibn Ja'far makes the statement, he says, I swear there is no better wife than Zainab bint Ali. This shows again the development of the personality of Sayyidah Zainab, in that her role as a spouse is something that she fulfills and completes entirely, to the extent where her spouse makes the claim that there is none better than her. Usually, it's the person who's closest to us is the one who's the first one to say, they could do something better. The world may see us as fantastic, but the people that know us most intimately are the ones who are most often that say, Alhamdulillah, it's okay. They could do something better. There's something they could tweak. There's some way they could improve. But Abdullah ibn Ja'far, the spouse of Sayyidah Zainab, is giving the statement and the complete statement from a pious individual that says that there is no spouse greater than Sayyidah Zainab. May Allah give us and our children all the tawfiq to follow the seerah of Sayyidah Zainab. We can look at many examples of the personality and the greatness of the impact of someone like Sayyidah Zainab. But there are two places that I want to show you the impact of this raising of the child on the path of Islam and the effect that it had, and how great the personality of Sayyidah Zainab is. That Sayyidah Zainab, in one of the places that it's known that we do great analysis around Sayyidah Zainab, is in her speeches. In her speeches, whether it's in the city of Kufa, in front of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, in front of Mal'un Yazid, all of these places, the discussion of the speeches of Sayyidah Zainab are around the fasaha, the eloquence, the balagha, the beauty of the speech of Sayyidah Zainab. But look at the circumstance in which these speeches are made. That not only is it in the court of an oppressor, but it's also in the court of the oppressor bound in chains. It's in the presence of those who are your enemies, with the open threat against your life. It is after the great losses that are suffered by the loss of your family and the loss of your loved ones and the loss of your children. All of these and further demonstrate that the moments at which we are analyzing the speeches of Sayyidah Zainab to look at the beauty and the eloquence of her speech are the times where, even had they been great men of status, they would have crumbled in the state of these difficulties. And one who is considered meek in the society and culture of the Arabs, that women were not considered to have this ability. Not only is Sayyidah Zainab present at these times, but that till today, her speeches and her comments are worthy of analysis at the highest levels, with complete disregard to the circumstance in which her speeches were made. When we raise our children correctly to defend the religion of Islam, when we give them the purity of both the nature we give them and the nurture that we provide them, we give them the capability and the love for Islam that they can follow the example of Sayyidah Zainab and disregard all of the difficulties in the interest of preserving what's truly valuable. The other example that's worthy to show the status of Sayyidah Zainab, and this will be inshallah the final point that we'll mention, is how impactful in our lives is the example of Sayyidah Zainab. To understand this, we take a look at the relationship between Sayyidah Zainab and her a'mal. I'll explain. For us as normal people, the greatness of us is by the deeds that we do. If I wanted to say that a person is a good person, I would describe that, yes, for example, this person is a good person. He prays tahajjud. He recites Quran. He fasts the mustahab fasts. He does, the mustahab a'mal. And what would happen is by knowing the value of these mustahab a'mal, by knowing the value of these acts of worship, we would say that this is a good person. So for example, Ali is a good person. He prays tahajjud. We say, oh, mashallah, Ali is attached to tahajjud, therefore Ali must be good. Zainab is a good person. She recites Quran. She fasts every day. We say, oh, mashallah, fasting is a difficult task. Zainab must be a good person. But the example of Sayyidah Zainab is different than this. Sayyidah Zainab is that personality, is that character, is that azim shakhsiyah, though she is not from amongst the ma'sumin, she is not amongst the imams, but her example is so great in status that the a'mal becomes superior by their attachment to Sayyidah Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab does not become superior by her attachment to the a'mal. I'll give you the example and you'll understand what I mean in understanding how azim this personality is and how blessed we are to be attached to have examples like Sayyidah Zainab in our life. One salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. With the hopes that I can convey this correctly without my tongue stumbling. When we look at the events after Ashura, amongst the fada'il that are listed, it said that Sayyidah Zainab did not miss Salatul Layl, Salatul Tahajjud once. That even throughout the process of being taken from Karbala to Kufa to Sham, she never missed her Salatul Layl. She always prayed the night prayer. To the extent where Imam Zainul Abidin explains, he says, I never saw my mother Sayyidah Zainab miss Salatul Layl. Even on the night after Ashura, she prayed Salatul Layl, though she had to do it sitting down that night. From this, we learn how important Salatul Layl is. If it would have been said that Sayyidah Zainab in this time didn't perform Salatul Layl, rather she focused her time on taking care of the women of the haram of Rasulullah, we would have said that what Sayyidah Zainab did in this situation, the importance and the priority was to take care of women and take care of the haram of Rasulullah. But the fact that she spent her time praying Salatul Layl and Tahajjud in this time, as well as taking care of the women, showed us how important Salatul Layl is. We would say that the ta'zeem and the greatness of Salatul Layl is understood by the example of Sayyidah Zainab performing it in difficulty, not the greatness of Sayyidah Zainab that she was someone who performed Salatul Layl. Alhamdulillah, may Allah attach us to the personalities and the family of Rasulullah, and may He give us the tawfiq to receive the wasila of Sayyidah Zainab. Let's raise our hands in dua. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم 10 times. Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. يا محمود بحق محمد، يا أعلى بحق علي، يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة، يا محسن بحق الحسن، يا قديم الإحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Oh Allah, allow us the tawfiq that our children may join us in heaven. Oh Allah, give us the wasila of Sayyidah Zainab in dunya and in akhirah. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of the religion of Ali Muhammad. Oh Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Oh Allah, those amongst our communities and families and the mu'mineen and the muslimeen and all of the people of this world that are suffering from this waba, Ya Allah, give shafa'ah to the mu'mineen, our families, the muslimeen, and all of the people of the world from these difficulties. Oh Allah, we have gathered with hajat. By the right of Sayyidah Zainab, fulfill our hajat. Oh Allah, we are in states of difficulty and tribulations. Ya Allah, remove from us the difficulties and tribulations. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahibul Zaman. Make us from the upright supporters of Sahibul Zaman. And give us the shafa'ah of Aba Abdullah in dunya and in akhirah. We end our discussion recitation of Surah Fatiha. Please remember to include our marhumin, those who have passed away, Haji Ghulam Abbas Yusuf Natani, Al-Hajj Sa'id Hussein Sayyid, and all those others from amongst our communities and families who have passed away and who are struggling through difficulties. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, مع الصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. 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 اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. يا الله 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 يا محمود بحق محمد، يا عالي بحق علي، يا فاطر بحق فاطمة، يا محسن بحق الحسن، يا قديم الإحسان بحق الحسين. انصر شيعة الحسين يا الله، انصر شيعة المؤمنين يا الله. اللهم اكشف هذه الغمة عن هذه الأمة يا الله. اقضي حوائج شيعة الحسين يا الله. شافي وعافي المرضى من شيعة الحسين يا الله. اللهم اقض حوائج المؤمنين يا الله. آمن شيعة الحسين في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها يا الله. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج واجعلنا من شيعته وأنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم كن لوليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أرنا الطلعة الرشيدة والغرة الحميدة واكحل أنظارنا بنظرة منا إليك. اللهم نقسم عليك بالزهراء فاطمة إلا ما جعلتنا من شيعة الزهراء ورزقتنا شفاعة الزهراء يا الله يا الله يا الله، لقضاء الحوائج ولشفاء المرضى ولكشف هذه الغمة عن هذه الأمة ولتعجيل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان، وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات لا سيما أرواح أموات شهداء البحرين والشهداء من المؤمنين والمؤمنات. رحم الله من يقرأ السورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. کیا بتاؤں مقام زینب کا، کیا بتاؤں مقام زینب کا، اسم اعظم مقام زینب کا، کیا بتاؤں مقام زینب کا. تیرے در پہ آئے گا جبریل، تیرے در پہ آئے گا جبریل، تو بھی ہو جا غلام زینب کا، تو بھی ہو جا غلام زینب کا. لطف مدح علی کا آتا ہے، لطف مدح علی کا آتا ہے، جب بھی لیتا ہوں نام زینب کا، جب بھی لیتا ہوں نام زینب کا. کیا بتاؤں مقام زینب کا. اللہ اللہ حر تیری قسمت، اللہ اللہ حر تیری قسمت، تجھ کو آیا سلام زینب کا، تجھ کو آیا سلام زینب کا. کیا بتاؤں مقام زینب کا. سارے نبیوں سے کہہ رہا تھا خدا، سارے نبیوں سے کہہ رہا تھا خدا، دیکھا تم سب نے کام زینب کا، دیکھا تم سب نے کام زینب کا. کل تھا مرکز علی کے دشمن کا، کل تھا مرکز علی کے دشمن کا، آج ہے ملک شام زینب کا، آج ہے ملک شام زینب کا۔ دیکھتا ہے حسین کا سجدہ، دیکھتا ہے حسین کا سجدہ، خود بھی رک کر خیام زینب کا۔ میری بہنوں حجاب لازم ہے، میری بہنوں حجاب لازم ہے یہ تم کو پیام زینب کا، ہے یہ تم کو پیام زینب کا۔ کیا بتاؤں مقام زینب کا، اس میں اعظم مقام زینب کا۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد، یا علی مدد۔
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين أيها الشهيد بكربلاء، السلام على التسعة المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي الباقر، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي التقي الجواد، وعلي بن محمد النقي الهادي، والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والأمر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك، وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك، وجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك ورحمة الله وبركاته.